You can unmute yourselves, Pavan and Bhaskar and everyone. So lovely seeing you again. So today we're going to talk about new commerce strategies post-COVID. But given that e-commerce has been on a huge rise, my first question, and this is to all of you in general, what would you think would be the key differences in e-commerce pre and post-COVID? And I'd love to hear from you on both what impact has this had on consumer behavior as well as what impact has it had on marketers or companies quickly adapting to this new world where consumers are in panic resorting to e-commerce. So open to all of you. Anyone wishes to take a stab at it?
Okay, if I may start. Hi, Pawan.
Hi.
I think it's been like a complete roller coaster ride, to say the least. I think last 4 months, a lot of things which were never written in a marketing book, like we literally had to like kind of reinvent and kind of see every day as a new day, right? So largely we are an offline brand, right? I think one of the big change which I see right now, and we've been hearing it for years, and in many forums, for me, I think the omni channel has completely come alive right now, if you look at it, right? So finally it's the consumer is going to decide whether the consumer wants to come to the store, or you should be delivering to the customer, or the customer wants to book online and he wants to pick it up. So I think the choices are completely with the customer. I think that's a big shift which we have seen in our business. And therefore I think it's finally, I mean, it's always been about the consumer, but in this time I think because of the pandemic, the consumers are kind of fearful. So therefore I think the business had to react as per the consumer demand and the consumer need. And in this case, honestly, we didn't have time, so we literally had to like fix things in like 2 weeks. A brand like Big Bazaar, which was never really doing e-commerce in that sense, we literally had to like fix it and kind of launch it within 2 months, which we did. Like, it's a mobile version which we have it, shop.bigbazaar, which we launched it. But I think that's been a big fundamental shift in terms of the way we look at consumer, right? Finally is the consumer who's deciding how the businesses should be behaving, and I think business like ours, we are reacting to that. I think that's one big change which I see.
Very well said. So, Pavan, what you're telling us is that we're actually reacting to what the consumers want. And that's in what's showing in the statistics as well. So, there was a survey that was done by BCG, which says that India shows the highest surge in preference for e commerce amongst all top nations. So, they've done this survey across a number of countries, and India scored right at the top. And e commerce actually continues to lead the growth for the overall economy in India as well. So these are some astounding numbers. Now, talking about numbers, I'd like to quickly go to Bhaskar, the king of numbers, and who would have everything on the world of e-commerce. Bhaskar, tell us from your perspective, what do you see as the key differences pre and post?
I think, hi Wani, and to my panelists and fun. I hope everybody is keeping safe during these very testing times. So, Pawan is really the line of fire, and he's doing everything because the consumer has already changed. And instead of throwing too many numbers at all of you, I want to share just one number, right, from the study that we have done on shopper behavior. 82% shoppers say that the way they have shopped has changed, right? And even in the which has been done just before, right? People have bought gold, people have bought automobiles, and apart from many other things, and even grocery, of course. So I feel that retail as an industry has now accepted that omni-channel commerce is completely going to stay. So the behavioral change is going to outlast the pandemic itself. And I want to summarize this consumer behavior pre and post COVID into like classical marketers like 3 C's. One is convenience, second is conscious, and third is cautious. Yeah. Let me just double click on each of
Okay.
them a little bit. As Pawan has said, everybody is looking for more convenience than ever before, right? So the biggest gainer in this entire change is this your hyper local retailer, right, next to you. So because more and more people are starting to have more convenience, demanding more convenience, and they're really the biggest store available to you, no matter what you want to buy, is your digital store on your mobile phone, and that has been a big, really big behavior shift. And so the most important store, whether you have 100 stores or 1,000 stores, right? The most important store for you continues to be your mobile store, right? The second is consumers are actually going to be very wallet conscious, and then value has become a very large component. If you see what is selling, a very high, very value conscious products are selling a lot more because combination of convenience and this whole consciousness of being more value is important. And the last is people have actually become very, very cautious, right? So earlier you were going to a store to surf, what do I like and explore and spend as much time as possible, etc. But today the time spent on mobile phones have actually increased to almost 4 to 4.5 hours a day, which means that they are spending inordinate amount of time because your has become the last point of contact and not the first point of contact anymore for majority of all of us. So I just want to summarize by saying that for retailers, footfalls have always been a priority all this while. But going forward in the post-COVID era, I would say finger falls would be as important or more important than
Very
footfalls.
interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. Rakesh, would you like to add to that?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Rakesh Mishra. I'm from Target. And I'll probably be, a little bit different in terms of all the insights or, stuff that I would share from a United States standpoint, because Target operates 1,900 odd stores and Target.com, which is a huge e-commerce platform in the US. So, Bunny, I think when we talk about e-commerce pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, I think we obviously are accepting it to a higher level and keeping it simple. From our perspective, when we think about this journey for the last 4.5 months, as Pawan alluded to, it's been a huge learning journey. I would characterize it as multiple chapters, even in this 4.5 months.
Sure.
And the reason it's multiple chapters is that you are actually with your consumers or guests, as we call them, through this entire journey, seeing them, being with them day in and day out. So the way it started, the very first time, kind of that, late February, early March time frame, everybody just flocked into physical stores, trying to get stock up of food and essential.
Right.
It went on for more than a month or so across the world.
Right.
Then the whole transition happened to people realizing that they would have to operate from their homes. And all of a sudden they had to think about, like, what do they need at home? And in many cases, it immediately kind of sort of went into like setting up an office, thinking about kids' education and all of that. So all of a sudden that became kind of the second chapter. And then came a time that they felt like, hey, we have been in this new kind of the world, but we need some relaxation too. We need some joyful moments too. And the third phase is where people have gone back and, looked at like, okay, what's there for inspiration? And even categories like apparels or any other kind of discretionary products that you would think, people have looked for it, guests have looked for it. So in our case, Bunny, I think Target has actually operated with that same maniacal notion of focusing on our guests and making sure that we are relevant for them no matter what, whether we are in a pandemic or we are not in a pandemic. So our focus has not wavered a wee bit. Obviously, our operating kind of sort of procedures and how we have reacted to it have changed, but the singular focus of being relevant and meaningful to our guests have not changed.
Very interesting. So, Rakesh, you talked about how even during this pandemic, there have been several phases. Probably, contributing to a number of finger falls, as Bhaskar mentioned. And now we are seeing consumer behavior possibly reviving even for non-essential categories where people are looking at how can I make my in-home experience a lot more pleasurable. So in this context, I want to ask, are there categories which are perhaps more relevant or more amenable for e-commerce than other categories? So, we were earlier discussing this. For example, electronics is an obvious one. A lot of people have gone out and bought phones and laptops during this time. But I wonder, they talk a lot about categories like cosmetics and apparel. But, for me, I worry that if I'm ordering cosmetics online, I might not be able to get the right shade. Unless, of course, it's a lipstick shade that I know. I'm always buying, say, 003 of L'Oreal. But other than that, I want to ask you, are there categories that lend themselves naturally to better e-commerce versus others? Bhaskar, you want to take that?
And
sure, go ahead, Rakesh, and Bhaskar can add.
Yeah, I probably wanted to quickly build on one point, right? So as we think about, the consumer behavior shifting and they feeling like they need a few things sitting from home.
Right.
You, let's say, already are operating in e-commerce and you have relevant experiences that can offer them that solution. I think in our case, Target has thought about that again. How can we be meaningful? How can we be frictionless in dishing out that experience? So I would quote an example. Home, as we know, is a very heavily invested category in terms of time and mind space from consumers or guests, right? And you would always wonder that, hey, I would have to walk into a store. I have to see kind of the furniture that I'm trying to buy or the chair that I'm trying to buy. How would it fit in? Whether this would match to my interior decoration that I've done. So a couple of years back, Bani, we had done a 360-degree virtual shoppable room.
Oh, lovely.
That we already had built, leveraging our cutting edge capability of CGI, that we have seen guests lapping up more and more, because today they not only get that kind of the functional expertise that they think from the brand, they get that, but they also can decide like how do they want to think about what specific chair that they want, what specific ottoman that they want, and they can mix and match. So categories that were traditionally conceptualized as, it has to be a physical store oriented only, through technology, through meaningful experiences that brands can build, can actually dish out that for our guests. So,
very interesting. In fact, a lot of luxury brands today have very quickly invested a lot in augmented reality, only so that they can serve their consumers better and they can serve their consumers while they're still sitting at home. Go ahead, Bhaskar. You were
no, I think yes. So Vani, I think let me just take a slightly more historical view and I'll come to your cosmetics question. So if you look at it, first of all, e-commerce is not a very old industry, right? It's give or take 5 to 6 years is an overall when it is actually taken. Internet itself is like a 20-year-old phenomenon. It's fairly young compared to But what we have seen definitely is that as internet penetration increases in the country, right, and it happened in every single country that we have seen, is that first of all, things like travel would get 100% digitized. So every single industry where the middle did not add value has been disrupted by digital, and eventually it becomes like a full funnel consumer journey, and then none of us actually buy any travel ticket online today, right? After travel, you're looking at banking and finance, all the banks starting to kind of digitize because money can actually be transacted digitally. And then e-commerce have actually, because money can be transacted digitally, e-commerce has actually taken off. And apparel, people are buying apparel and all those books and the whole Amazon phenomena. And then food tech has actually taken off, gaming has taken off. And now we have reached a stage when India today has almost like 500 million internet users and hundreds of millions of shoppers currently. So we are seeing even traditional categories like grocery, right? Kirana, grocery, automotives. All the OEMs in India are actually looking at dealer digitization and also reimagining how a dealership would look like for tomorrow, right? Overall, or consumer electronics, durables. So I think the argument, not even the argument, the discussion is not really about whether e-commerce or is going to take over and will the traditional retail is going to become redundant, right? It is not online versus offline. Even in the most developed country like the United States, only 11% of their entire retail is on e-commerce, even today. And it is one of the most advanced countries, right? But the fact is, 89% of all retail is influenced by a digital touch point. And that's the fundamental change.
That's very interesting.
Which makes a difference. And that brings me to your question on cosmetics, right? Beauty is one category within the whole FMCG space, which is ready to be really go digital in a very big way. For example, I just want to share with you, because the whole ecosystem, right? The whole user journey from discovery of something to sampling to buying to feedback, the whole ecosystem is actually digitized. So think of it this way. There are almost 4 billion queries happening on the internet, and Google has been aggregating intent, right? There are 4 billion queries on beauty alone in India. I'm talking about India, and 60% of this is actually happening on on YouTube. And then you have almost 200 odd beauty creators, creating almost like 400 million views every month. On an average, right? And all these guys are more than 1 million subscriber kind of channels. So you're talking about this consumer discovery and the influencers simplifying the decision for the users, right? And you see the whole e-commerce taking off. So what we are seeing is that clearly, like, not only the traditional companies like a L'Oreal and a Unilever trying to go digital, and you see many of them have now direct-to-consumer kind of approaches. But there are a lot of brands like Sugar Cosmetics, there are a lot of brands like Mama Earth, who have not even spent a penny in a traditional way, whether offline or having presence in online, are actually being able to build 200, 300 crore kind of businesses, right? From nowhere. So there are large direct-to-consumer brands, there are a large influencer ecosystem, there are big brands digitized, consumers already on board. So when your ecosystem is right, is developed in a right way, every category can be digitized. So unless you are selling steel, I think you should be convinced that digital touchpoint will impact your offline purchase.
No, so that's very interesting. In fact, I was reading about a Chinese company that had a whole lot of store promoters in their, in their beauty outlet. And what they've done is they've converted all of those beauty advisors to becoming online beauty advisors and influencers. And with that, they've actually seen a spike in sales, which is many-fold of what they had, in fact, pre-COVID. So, which also brings me to, there are platforms like Bulbul, where there are even for tier 2, tier 3 cities, they're showcasing how a product can be used, and via demonstration and via building credibility on how this product can be used. It's bringing a lot of traction from smaller tier cities. So my question here is, typically when one thinks of e-commerce, one thinks about people who are digitally savvy, right? And in India, we always talk about growth coming from the next billion, and Pawan would be able to help me with this. But tell me, with all of this shift, radical shift towards e-commerce, whether it be actual buying or using online to make a decision, like you said, even in the case of US, 89% of it has actually been influenced by digital. Where do you think is the predominant shift? Or do you think even tier 2, tier 3 cities are actually in step with this digital transformation? Do you see a lot of activity over there?
Yeah, so Vani, I like the word digital transformation. I think it's just not from a business perspective. I also feel that it's happening in our life. Like I was talking to my team in the afternoon. So I'm from Bombay, and imagine what a Ganesh Chaturthi is going to be. I think we'll be visiting homes, our friends and family through Zoom. I mean, that's what is definitely going to happen, right?
Yes.
So I think it's changing. It's really playing a huge role in terms of. I mean, I feel that some of the technologies actually got us together far more closer. If you look
Yes,
at it,
yes,
right?
yes.
And we were discussing that maybe the festivities we are celebrating it in a more with more spirit. If you look at, right, and I think technology is definitely providing that, right? So I think that's a big change is happening across all of us as consumers. And I agree to what Bhaskar said, and I really like the line which he said. What was it? Finger some the walking
Finger
Finger falls.
falls.
finger falls. Yeah,
Finger falls.
I think that's really going to impact. And Vani, when we were talking earlier, even let's talk about tier 2 and tier 3, right? I mean, how are these small time retail stores? How are they doing businesses? So I
Yes,
believe
yes,
WhatsApp has played a big role in terms of really
yes.
facilitating business for them, right? So whether it's high tech technology or a Jugaru technology, I think it's everywhere and it's going to stay. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, I mean, even at Big Bazaar, in the smaller towns, right, where we actually gave service to our customer with a WhatsApp number saying, just click your list. If you don't want to type, just send it across to us and we'll deliver it back to you, right? So I think these are small, large, big changes which are happening everywhere. And I agree to most of you in terms of it's not a question about offline retail or online retail, right? I think it's a shift in terms of the way we are engaging and the way phone is becoming important to us, right? I think to me that's the biggest net takeout. Whether you want to socialize, whether you want to meet your relatives, whether you want to play Ludo, whether you want to do gaming, I think it's all I think the world is coming to a small device called phone, and I think there is a huge dependency which we are showcasing in terms of socializing, buying, networking, conferencing right now. I think everything. So I think that's a big shift, which and I believe it's going to continue for sure.
So that's very interesting. You're saying that Big Bazaar was, you were actually allowing consumers to take a picture of their shopping list, and all they had to do was to just take a picture of their handwritten shopping list, and you would send them, everything that they had on that list.
100%, 100%.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, that's how to actually empower the customer, because there are lots of housewife as our customers. They're not comfortable maybe typing, and I'm sure Bhaskar will create something for them for sure very soon. But I'm just saying, these are the challenges, and this is how India has to sort of, it will grow. This is how the penetration will grow, right? And there's so much of jugaad which happens, at people level is not funny, and that's where we learn from them. Actually, it's so much of reverse learning which happens from consumer, and we've always embraced it. We've always done that.
I think
Bunny, it might be.
Typing.
Sorry.
Yeah. Bunny, if you think it may be relevant, right? Every time when we have a panel discussion like this, the conversation, whether even before this pandemic, right? The conversation is all about, hey, how is digital growing? Digital is more important than ever before. What we know for sure before this pandemic or post this pandemic, that question is not to be disputed.
Right.
That digital is the future. But knowing that it's a group of marketeers that have come together for a session like this, I think instead of even presenting this discussion as a flip of a switch, that, oh, now this pandemic has hit and all of us should jump into this e-commerce bandwagon, we should think about what are some of those foundational capabilities that are also important, whether it was pre-digital or post-digital.
Absolutely.
Let me give an example.
Yes.
When we think about this pandemic and the importance of digital, and the ability to be able to transact, the most important thing that consumers or guests in our case continue to look up to is solidity of information. The veracity of like, what are you offering, right? So in that case, the importance of content, like how are you thinking about presenting what you have to sell, irrespective of which category that you are operating in, is critical. And in that case, like in a scenario that we are talking about in this post-pandemic, I would draw your attention to obviously product information, the ability to be able to demonstrate like how to use that product, usage videos, and so on and so forth. But more importantly, what are your fellow consumers talking about it? How do
Yes,
you think about
absolutely.
UGC coming into play? Like
Yes.
the way we talked about a beauty advisor, today
Yes.
for us, beauty as a category is heavily influenced by UGC. And we are leveraging that. So as a marketer, as a student of like marketing, where consumers are going, I think we'll have to start thinking about it a bit more holistically, again, being anchored on the guest as we think about it. And we just at Target, we have always felt that that is one thing that has stood the test of the time. And in that context, the physical stores will continue to be relevant because they will play kind of an embedded role. And this is the true vision of that omni-channel,
Yeah.
retailing or omni-channel, even customer engagement that we talk about.
Yeah.
We are
Yeah.
there where they need us. We are there to offer them the
Yeah.
solutions that they need, no matter where they want to engage.
Yeah. So I know Bhaskar talks very passionately about connected commerce, but I'm going to take this discussion a little towards, what Pawan said. Pawan said we don't want to restrict our, we don't want consumers to be restricted by their ability to type, which is why they came up with this very simple solution. Or you talked about the solidity of information, about the veracity of information offered. So would it be fair to say that today, given that a lot of our internet users, about 60% of our internet users do come from tier 2, tier 3 cities, and there's also a statistic that says about 75% of the internet users are also vernacular language users. Today, we perhaps are more restricted by our ability to dish out content in the many different languages that India is about. And if we were to have far greater participation in voice and vernacular, then we'd be able to see a far greater explosion of the possibilities of not just e-commerce, but also what we call, integrated or connected commerce.
Yeah. So, Vani, in fact, this whole assumption and hypothesis that the next billion users who are going to come to the internet are going to be less savvy than the first 100, 200 million users, right, is really an assumption, right? It is not tested. I think you see, when it comes to the time spent on smartphone, from the time somebody feature phone to a smartphone, even from a tier 2 user or even a rural user, over a period of 1 or 2 years, right? The user actually catches up on the time spent watching video apps, right? So wherever language is not a barrier, the user actually upgrades, and actually mimics the urban user. So there is absolutely no difference that we see, number one. Second thing is that it's very interesting, right? Like one of the reasons for massive success of their behavior is very different. So we always keep talking about video, voice, and vernacular are the three big barriers, or three big trends, right? Which is going to leapfrog the next generation of users. So, and hence solutions like Bulbul, right, which is offering video commerce. They may not want to type or text or etc. Right? They just want to or they may just. But today they are calling their store nearby store. Tomorrow that entire interaction could actually be digital. So this whole connected commerce need to be reimagined for them, for us to penetrate deeply into the next 100 million users in India by solving for all the things that you have just said. But what is definitely going to not change is the fact that whether it is an urban guy or a rural guy, if there is any consumer who's walking into your store, he or she is much more informed than ever before. You will see that the footfalls per week, in a mall is going to, I heard the number, it used to be 4 per week. It is now going to be 2 per week, right, on an average. Now, the number of footfalls in auto dealerships have actually declined, but people are coming just to buy, right? They know what to do, what not to do. So this whole online research, online purchase, offline behavior is going to go 10x during this phase. And I think, as the ecosystem solves for voice, vernacular, and video in a big way, it will bring the next 100 million shoppers also online pretty quickly.
So, question to Bhaskar and Pawan: do you think post-COVID, like Bhaskar is saying, do you think the consumer behavior is likely to stick? With coronavirus, all of us have been pushed into behaving in different ways. Pushed into as in whether we want it to or not. E-commerce has radically accelerated. In what ways do you think consumer behavior will stick post-COVID? Are we likely to be changed entities post-COVID?
So my response, Vani, to this, so one thing which I kind of disagree with Bhaskar, if you look at the fabric of India, right?
Yeah.
I think, it's very different compared to many other developed countries, because I think when it comes to going out or even shopping or even going to a mall or even going to a store, it's a part of our social fabric, right? We don't have infrastructure where we can go for a weekend to a park and stuff like that, right? So there is a lot of beyond shopping which happens. I mean, we have seen it in Big Bazaar, where in the smaller towns, if you go, actually people come dressed up there, right? You will not see a woman not wearing a proper sari and stuff like that. So it's also a lot to do with how people are trying to figure out or socialize in some of these spaces, right? So I think, of course, like COVID is kind of forcing them to be inside their house because they don't have choices. But my point is that that's not something which is ever going to go away from India, right? Because we have very, very, very limited infrastructure, right? And this is how we use it, right? That's one point which I want to make. Secondly, my bigger point is about that, how mobile is going to become an enabler, right? And therefore, I think businesses, they have to change. And that's why I quite like what Bhaskar said. It's like, obviously, there is a surge, there is everything which is going to happen. But finally, where the purchase happens, we'll see. My belief is that, both of them will coexist as much as there. But just the dependency on, making mobile a part of your extended personality is going to be very, very high, right? I mean, and therefore I think, like we can see video calls, video chat, there's so much happening, right? So I feel, the dependency on mobile is going to be very, very high. And therefore, I think all of us as businesses, we need to change and we need to be part of their entire moment. You call it search, you call it discovery, whatever you call it, right? We need to be part of that.
Very nice. So, Pawan, you talked about how, in India, going out to a store is actually a social event for us. We dress up.
Absolutely.
Rakesh, do you want to comment on that? Since Target is all US, tell us what do you think are the one or two differences?
I was itching to kind of say that.
Go ahead.
Two perspectives quickly.
Yes.
One is, I think it's not going to be kind of completely go away. Like the way we think about the impact of the pandemic. Like there are some behaviors that we are demonstrating today, whether it's United States, whether it's in India, there are some behaviors that are there for the pandemic, and that's very specific. There are some behaviors that we are learning, which are actually good for us, that would ideally things that we would love to embrace, and it would help us.
Nice.
But at the end of the day, value will transcend. Value for what consumers or guests
Very nice.
kind of crave for. That's what would transcend this notion of like, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's not a pandemic, will 2022 be different from 2021? Of course it will be different. But we as companies or brands or marketeers, we will have to make sure that we are remaining flexible We are learning from our guests or consumers, and we are continuing to adapt as we hear from them, as we observe them, and as we try to be meaningful for them. That is how I think we would have to run.
Very well said, Rakesh. In fact, since you specifically took that question about, talked about what we must serve to our consumers, there is this question specifically on consumer behavior. The question from from the audience is, will consumer behavior change after the vaccine is out? Would anybody have a view on that? Do you think we will all flock back to stores once the vaccine is out?
I'll give it a shot. First of all, I think both Target in the US and Big Bazaar in India have been the largest consumer champs, and I think I completely agree with the current thought process, right? When it comes to like maybe there are many Indias, and we need to do much more to kind of change the overall behavior. However, I want to just share one big statistic which is in public domain. In July 2020, the number of UPI transactions are 1.5 billion in July. 1.5 billion UPI transactions and 82% year-on-year growth.
Wow. Okay.
And the money transacted, on that is actually for 2,90,000 crores. Okay. So consumers, once I think digital payments is a big, I would say, lead indicator for consumers' ability to kind of move from, traditional ways of transacting to the next way, right? Because, and I also manage entertainment as a sector as a part of my portfolio. The number of net paying consumers, right, for things like gaming or OTT platforms for subscription, right, overall, India has been, among the highest, if not the highest in the world in the recent period. So what we are seeing is that we are seeing consumers from being a lot more, I would say, familiar and comfortable with transacting online, and that behavior is not going to change post-COVID, etc. Second is people are constantly seeking value, and they want to research a lot more, and that is not going to change. And the third statistic is that the rural growth among internet users is 4 times that of urban growth, during this phase. So there's going to be accelerated digitization. So all these factors gives me some confidence to say that I think the journey that US has taken to reach 11% of retail, right? I think India is going to possibly make the entire journey faster, because there's a lot of action happening here, right? From internet penetration, video penetration, data prices, smartphone penetration, payments penetration. So all these combined factors are going to accelerate the digitization. Having said that, again, the whole era is about coexistence, and digital will be a biggest enabler and a transformative core to the overall retail business.
Bhaskar, I think I want to build on that point just from a number perspective, right? Very, very quickly. And again, a very different world, right? US. I will tell you, you talked about 80% growth of UPI payments in first quarter, which was kind of the quarter that saw the most impact of the pandemic in the onset stage. Our digital business grew by 141%. But our overall business also grew by 11%. And these are big numbers.
Yes.
Yeah, on that base, I can imagine it's a very big number.
So
Rakesh, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to take one last question. I think we just have a couple of minutes left to go. There is a question from Swapan Chaudhary, and the question is, since Pawan was talking about people flocking to Big Bazaar outlets because it's a social event, the question is, how important is the visual content of the offered products on any e-commerce site? The fact that I am still dependent on the number of visuals posted of the product if I have to make a decision. Of course, there are online user reviews, etc. But I don't have the luxury of what I can do in the store, which is to turn the product around, try and use it, see how it feels, etc. Especially for fabric, for me, is a big issue on how it might fall on my body, for example. So how does e-commerce solve for that? Is AR, VR the only option, which is all very expensive and high tech?
So, if I may take Vani, I think content is always going to be important because
Yeah.
finally, what you're selling is you have to glamorize it, and I think in a physical store, a salesperson does it by describing it, in a way. If you look at it in the online world, I think the content, the video, or the shoot has to do that, right? I mean, that's very fundamental of kind of selling a product or experience.
Yes, yes.
Right, that doesn't take away. So one needs to just imagine, right, that you are in this world, and how you would want to capture. I mean, I in my Facebook feed, there is this woman called, I think, Shanti, right, from UK, right? She's a Indian born UK, and I believe she works for Google out there in UK. And I've been seeing she does live on Facebook, and she sells products. It's amazing.
Okay.
It's amazing the way she describes it. And she sells high-end jewelry, by the way, through her
Wow.
Facebook Live session. And she does it I'm going to share the link with all of you on the WhatsApp.
Wow.
Have a look. See, this is what it is. I mean, I'm saying that, these are fundamental of selling, right? Which you have to. Somebody's doing it live with you there every hour, every day, and selling products like anything. Or you are an e-commerce platform where you can't interact in, such a personal way, but your content has to do the job. I mean, there's nothing taking away from it.
So
Absolutely.
there's almost nothing that one can't do in e-commerce. And it's also going to give rise to a lot of allied industries. Like, the quality of photo shoots will have to radically go up.
Yes, absolutely.
Good photographers will be in demand.
Yeah, Vani, I think just to build on that's the whole point, right? Like, one is things like AR, VR can take off. India is already touching almost like 100 million phones which can support AR core. So that means that there will be more innovation in that space. But nothing cute the physical touch and feel, and hence that learning is important. So we need machine learning, but definitely we need a lot of human learning to be able to blend both the worlds over time.
Yes. Super. So with that, can we end?
Yeah.
Shiny?
Absolutely, Vani. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kavya.
Thank you. It was lovely.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And I think we managed to get some amazing insights thanks to all of you. And thank you, Vani, for beautifully spearheading this. I was taking a look at the chat, and everybody is like, can somebody share the entire video? Because there are so many insights to note down. Thank you so much again to all of our speakers. Well, that's right, indeed. It was wonderful to see how you've all shared how the world is in fact coming to the mobile phone. Earlier, it was all about us going over there to the retail outlets, but all the ideas, everything is coming to the mobile phone now. And with that, I'm going to also take a moment to thank all our attendees who have dropped in some amazing questions. And Vani, in fact, managed to pick some really good questions from the chat as well. So thank you once again to Bhaskar. Thank you very much, Mr. Rakesh. Thank you, Mr. Pavan. And thank you once again, Vani, for joining us in the session.
Thank you so much. It was lovely. Thank you, Vani.